This presentation asks one of the more important questions of our time, and that has to do with the morality of the money that we use in our economy and what its impact is on the world's water issues. My name is Gwendolyn Hallsmith. I'm the Director of Global Community Initiatives at the Headwaters Garden and Learning Center in Cabot, Vermont. Now, before we look at what moral money would be, we need to ask ourselves, why is the current money system we're using immoral? We can look back to the Bible for answers to this, where there's lots of references to wealth and money, everything from Jesus turning over the tables of the money changers outside the temple, to when he said, "It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." The type of money we use now is money that is born in bank debt. This kind of money creates a widening gap between the rich and the poor, and it also causes more poverty. You can see from the slide that in the United States, the top 0.1% of the population has an income that averages at $23.8 million a year, where the bottom 90% scrapes by on $29,000. This is a huge gap in income, and it causes immeasurable suffering. On the global scale, it's even worse. This slide shows that the top 8.4 of the global population control 83.3% of the wealth. The bottom 91% control only 16.7% of the wealth. This global wealth inequality is one of the key moral problems of our time, and it's caused by the kind of money we use. All money that we're using right now is created with debt and interest. It comes into existence through the issuance of debt, by and large by the banking system. Now, we know from the Bible and from our own human experience over millennia that lending money with debt and interest can be a real problem over time. We see in Exodus chapter 22, verse 24, "If thou lend money to any of my people, even to the poor with thee, thou shalt not be to him as a creditor, neither shall ye lay upon him interest." And Leviticus chapter 24, verse 36, "Take thou no interest of him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee." Now, we know back in the time when this was written, the tradition was that every 7 years debts were forgiven, and every 7 times 7 years, the property that was taken to repay debts was given back to its rightful owners. This, in fact, is how Jesus began his ministry, by declaring the year of the Lord to the people of Nazareth. It was supposed to be the Jubilee year, and since only the king could declare it, that was what made them chase him out of town, because of their fear of retribution from the Romans. Now, banks create money for individuals by making deposits of new loans. This process creates more and more and more debt, as those deposits are deposited in new banks, and with the reserve requirement in those new banks, new money is developed out of the money that used to be someone else's debt. The Federal Reserve does the same for the U.S. government through the purchase of treasuries. This process of bank money creation causes an exponentially growing money supply. At the same time, it creates an exponentially growing level of indebtedness for both the public and the private sector. This chart shows the data that proves that. On the left, you have the U.S. money supply from 1959 to 2007, and on the right, you have the national debt from the 1940 to present. In both cases, you see an exponential growth curve. That means that the growth of money and debt is increasing at an increasing rate. Now, the kind of money that we're using causes poverty because the money that is borrowed with interest is borrowed typically by people that don't have enough money, and the interest is paid to the banks and the people that do have a lot of money. So it's a giant transfer of wealth from the poorest among us to the wealthiest among us. But on top of that, the neoliberal policies of the banks and the money's owners create even more poverty through the austerity measures they exact on countries that have gotten a lot of debt, like Greece. Just after the collapse of 2008, austerity measures were imposed there, whereas previously they'd been limited to the countries in the developing world. Suddenly, Europe is now the subject of austerity measures, and the austerity impacts in Greece were that unemployment doubled from 7.7% to 15%, 30% for women. Wages went down 7%, inflation tripled, extreme poverty increased by 5%, farm poverty by 40%. These are the results of the austerity measures imposed by the same monetary system that creates the poverty in the first place. This is the exact opposite of the way we're taught to be Christians in the world. We're taught to feed the hungry, to house the homeless, to clothe the naked, to be friends and hospitable to the stranger. But the austerity budgets, the austerity processes do exactly the opposite. Now, if we wanted to understand what a moral money system would mean, what its goals might be, what would that look like? Well, money can meet human needs for water, food and shelter, education, the arts, recreation, having a voice in our own destiny. Poverty can be abolished with a different kind of money system. A money system could promote racial, social, and economic justice. It could enable spiritual development toward empathy and unity, whereas the money system we have now does not do that. It encourages separation, isolation, and competitiveness. The money system could build and support resilient families and communities. It could foster human enlightenment, creativity, and care. All of these type of goals for the money system would put a new money system on the side of love instead of on the side of fear and scarcity, where it is now. Now, creating money through the issuance of debt, on the other hand, consolidates wealth and power in the hands of the few. It systematically takes wealth from those who can least afford it, and it fosters a zero-sum game where people must lose so that other people's debts may be repaid. This is because when the debts are written into existence by the banks, the interest to pay them is not. What this creates on a systemic level is a very competitive game where some people have to lose and for other people to win. The inflation driven by the positive interest money we use discounts the future, and that robs future generations of their birthright. It undermines social cohesion. It amplifies the destructive consequences of the business cycle. After all, when the economy falls into disrepair, the banks pull back their credit, which in turn causes more businesses to fail and more people to be unemployed. And likewise, when the economy is booming, credit's readily available and the bank debt money fuels the bubbles that causes the economy to collapse later. Finally, this type of money drives the growth imperative as companies need to make profit at an increasing rate to keep up with the cost of money. The growth imperative is the reason that we're having runaway climate change, species extinction, and resource extraction. All of these things are leading us to a very unsustainable future. Now, public money without debt can be issued for a lot of things, and it has been used throughout history very successfully to support sustainable economies. Public money can be issued for public infrastructure like water treatment and distribution, social services like education, health, and housing, basic income for all people, renewable energy and energy efficiency, organic food conversion and food distribution, environmental cleanup, and climate change mitigation. We know through the Sustainable Development Goals at the UN that we need billions of dollars to carry out these programs, and we don't know where that money is coming from. The debt-based money system is failing us. It's failing humanity because it can't help us solve these problems. We need to revert to public money, which has been used throughout history for these very successfully. Another problem with the kind of money we use is that it rewards some of the worst traits that humanity tends to show. It rewards hoarding behavior over sharing because of the artificial scarcity that the money system creates on that systemic level. It rewards selfishness. It rewards greed. It rewards corruption. These are the type of traits in humanity that cause alienation and violence. We need to change the money system because these are all side effects of a system that creates artificial scarcity. The scarcity and the violence and the poverty caused by this system leads to isolation, broken homes, ruined lives, corruption, crime, genocide, and war. Further, the system itself profits from all of these things. If that isn't proof that the system that we're using is an immoral monetary system, I don't know what is. Now, what's the impact of money on the world's water? This is a serious question for a conference on World Water Day at the Vatican. One of the critical impacts is the drive toward privatization. The drive toward privatization has been led by the banks, by the international development banks, and has been pushed in the developing and the developed world for the last 25 to 30 years. The results have been higher tariffs for water and fewer people being hooked up to public and safe water systems. This is a real problem, and it's a direct result of people needing to make a profit at an increasing rate because of the monetary system that we're using. We're running out of places to find profitable ventures, and so people are turning to what used to be public goods to try and create that profit out of the public sector. Further, the way that money is valued, the way that water is valued in this system is a false and corrupt valuation based only on the money spent. It doesn't take into account things like biodiversity, human health, and ecosystem services. These two things, privatization and incorrect valuation, exacerbate the problems in the water system. They exacerbate environmental contamination, which is treated as an externality in this economy. It creates a bigger divide between the rich and the poor. 40% of the world's population does not have access to safe water. It causes more disease and hunger, species extinction, and climate change impacts. Now, all of these problems can't be solved with the current system, in much the same way as this chapter from James tells us that the bitter fountain is not able to produce sweet water. What is the true value of water? We don't count human health. We don't count environmental health. We don't count ecosystem services and biodiversity. All of these are not the goal or even the main consideration in the current economic system, driven by this underlying debt-based money system. So changing the system and putting the true value of these important and sacred human needs to be at the forefront of our thinking. How do we create rivers of living water so that people and nature all over this beautiful earth can have what they need? Money needs to serve human and environmental health and not the other way around. Public money without debt needs to replace private money in our economic system. Public banks are a good first step in this regard because they can replace private banks and make money more like a public utility and less like a profit center for people that already have lots of it. The banking business model is one everybody would love to have. They create something out of nothing and charge the rest of the world the privilege of using it. Complementary currencies are another way that the economy can be made more resilient by having more than one monetary instrument that meets all of our needs. We need a system of global surplus redistribution. This was the original idea of the IMF, but now the IMF serves the rich countries and the rich people of the world at the expense of the poor. And we need limits to wealth consolidation on a global scale. There is no reason on earth that a small handful of people control most of the wealth in the world. This is an incredible injustice. It is immoral to the extreme. And as people of faith, we need to take these questions seriously and work to reform the economic system that we use. These are the end of my prepared comments. I'm happy to answer questions at the contact information listed here. Thank you for your attention.